Now, when there's a powerful group, let's say a government, maybe a corporation, or police, and they do something terrible to somebody who's got a lot less power, there's a predictable set of things that happen. Now, I've studied police beatings, massacres of peaceful protesters, torture, and genocide. These same tactics are used. The powerful group doesn't want others to get excited and do something about it. And even the Nazis, when they said the so-called euthanasia program, killing people with disabilities, they use the same techniques. They use 5 techniques, they're on the sheet there: cover up, devaluation, reinterpretation, official channels, and intimidation. See it over and over. So I'm going to describe how this played out in something that you will remember from the year 2004, the Abu Ghraib torture scandal. Now, it so happened that there are lots of torture going on in the war on terror after the invasion of Iraq. For example, at Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan, nothing ever came out. There was a few little news reports. There's no big outrage about this. But the thing that broke it all open was photos from Abu Ghraib prison. Now, Abu Ghraib prison had been a prison under Saddam Hussein. The Americans took it over. They captured various people, and they did various things, piled them in naked bodies, sick dogs on them, stand them up with electrodes and so forth. Okay, you've seen the photos. Now, what we often don't think about is that without those photos, we would have never known. And there's probably lots of things that were not known. So, you want it closer? Thank you. Thank you for that. Here's the scenario. The prison guards were taking photos of their own activities, and they never expected anyone to find out. And in fact, if they hadn't taken those photos, we'd never know that there was torture going on at Abu Ghraib prison. So it's very much cover-up. The guards knew what's happening. The men who were being tortured knew what was happening, but because there's no strong evidence that's going to convince outsiders, it just falls beneath the media news criteria. And so the reports from the Red Cross about torture in bases never got big media coverage. So what happened is that at Abu Ghraib, the guards took photos and they passed them on. Charles Grainer Jr. passed them on to Joseph, another fellow, and he happened to look at these CDs. He got them for a different purpose, looked at the CDs, he was concerned, and he passed them on to the Criminal Investigation Division. And they investigated, and eventually it got out beyond the situation in Iraq. Now here's the other thing. In the United States, where the media are very much lapdogs, they do not like to challenge the government. Eventually, 60 Minutes too got a hold of the photos, but they were checking with the Pentagon, the CIA, about whether they're going to broadcast them, and they weren't going to do it. It's only because Seymour Hersh, who's an investigative journalist, had followed up the story. He was about to publish the story in the New Yorker, so then the TV went ahead. So it required both a courageous soldier to reveal this, to pass it on. It required investigators who took it seriously, and it required journalists who were going to break the story before any of us found out about this. So the key things about torture in the world, torture is going on in dozens of countries, is that most of it's covered up. The governments don't want you to know what's going on. The second method that's used is devaluation of the target. And not usually necessary. If it's all secret, we don't find out about it anyway, no need. But in the case of the prisoners at Abu Ghraib, they're called terrorists. And we didn't know otherwise, or they're called towel heads. and they're seen, and we don't see their faces except in those photos. So when it's being done to an anonymous person, it doesn't seem so bad. When you've got a photo, it makes a huge difference. So the photographs made the breakthrough in turning this into a sort of silent thing which done to nasty people. These are real people who are being tortured. So validating the targets is the crucial step in challenging torture. And the more that you can give personal details, such as Lucy is telling you about Ali, then that is very effective. Now the third thing that goes on is what I call reinterpretation. The government likes to explain what they're doing as okay. So they say, oh, it's not really torture, it's abuse. They relabeled it at Abu Ghraib, they said it's abuse, and the media followed up. The media followed, and they never hardly ever referred to torture, they referred just to abuse and humiliation. And they also said this is the responsibility of just a few rogue prison guards. So they're blaming people at the bottom, not accepting that there's high-level incentives and pressures that lead to this sort of thing. So you've got a set of methods that are used to reinterpret what's happening, including lying, minimizing the consequences. For example, saying, oh, well, waterboarding is not all that bad, really. You just do that every day, and it's not really torture. And, sensory deprivation is not really torture. So there's minimizing the consequences, blaming other people, and then saying it's actually, we're doing this to find information. They change it to say we're just hurting people to hurt them, or to, as a power play to say we're actually trying to get information, but they never told us much information about what the prisoners at Abu Ghraib. Now the fourth method that's used by powerful groups is the counterintuitive one, official channels. Official channels means things like grievance procedures, ombudsman, the courts, appealing to parliamentarians, all the methods that we think are supposed to provide justice. Now they may work a lot of the time, but when there's a powerful group that is doing the injustice, the official channels only give an appearance of justice and not the substance. And so at Abu Ghraib, you had all sorts of investigations. There's 10 different inquiries, over 100 different investigations in individuals, but no one who was higher up was charged or convicted of anything. It's all focused on the lower downs, and it went on for months and months. So people think, oh yes, they're doing all that they can, but actually it just gave the appearance that there's actually justice going to be done. And the fifth method is intimidation. Now we know in torture that the person who's being tortured, that's the most extreme form of intimidation you can imagine. And a lot of the survivors of torture are afraid to speak out because they might happen to them again. But intimidation also applies to witnesses, people who might speak out. And for example, there was one of the whistleblowers about torture in Iraq. He spoke out, but instead they medevaced him out and accused him of having a psychiatric illness, even though psychiatrists later found that no problem at all. So whistleblowers are subject to reprisals as a method of discouraging them, not so much even them, but to discourage everyone else from speaking out. So predictably, these 5 methods are used to reduce outrage, but the counter methods are expose it, stand up and validate the targets. Thirdly, explain it as an injustice. Fourthly, don't rely on the official channels, but instead try and mobilize support. And fifthly, you need some people who are going to stand up to intimidation. They need to resist. And when you get all of this happening, and you get what I call a backfire, and Abu Ghraib was a tremendous disaster for the US government because it lowered the reputation of the government, especially through the Middle East. And so a lot of people in the Middle East survey showed they thought all Americans were like these prison guards. It was totally disastrous. So even though most of the cases of powerful groups doing terrible things, most of them, they get away with it, A few times they don't. And that's the sort of thing we need to do. Prepare by being prepared to expose it, to support, validate the victims, interpret it as an injustice, not rely on official channels, and resist the intimidation. Thank you.